Hello fellow guitar geeks, my name is Andy and this is the Boss Katana Air, and in this video I'm going to show you how to modify the Katana Air so you can plug it into almost any guitar cab in the world. The Katana Air is a small, lightweight, battery-powered practice amp that has all the power of a Boss Katana, but is tiny and you can carry it around with you. It's got several different amp models, it's got a huge array of built-in effects, Bluetooth, a headphone socket, a wireless transmitter for your guitar. What it doesn't have is the ability to plug into an external speaker. Well, yours doesn't, mine does. Even though I focus on the Katana Air in this video, you could apply the same methods and the same information to any stereo practice amp. So you could do this on a Spark from Positive Grid, or you could do this on an ID Core from Blackstar, or any other stereo practice amp. Before we go any further, I must advise you not to do this. So even though in this video I'm showing you exactly how to do it, I would say don't do it so you don't run the risk of either damaging an amp or hurting yourself. So that's my disclaimer out of the way, and now that I've told you not to do it, I'm going to do it. If you've just ignored what I'm saying and you're planning on doing this to your Katana Air or your practice amp, then please make sure you watch the video several times through before you unscrew anything or turn on a soldering iron. And if you stick around to the end of the video, you get to hear me plug this in to several cabs and hear the Katana Air powering a real guitar cab. But now it's modding time, so let's put it on the bench, open it up, and have a little look inside. Here's the amp ready to be modded. There are 8 screws on the bottom, but first remove the battery so there's definitely no power going to the amp. That would ruin things. Then take out the 8 screws, put them in a little pot so you don't lose them. But before you take off that bottom panel, the bottom panel is attached to the amp with a cable inside, so be very careful, lift it off, and I'll show you the cable now. There it is, it's just an easy quick connect cable that you can just pull free with your fingers, no tools needed. Gently prise it, and it's off. There's the little connector, so you can see that you can just simply connect it without soldering or anything like that. Put it to one side, you don't need that anymore. Here's a close-up. You've got the speakers in there connected with 4 cables to the stereo amp. There's the amp connection. Here is a top tip. Take photos before you do any mods. Right. Here is one of the speakers, just connected right there with positive and negative. Here's the other speaker, positive and negative. Let's have a little closer look. There, so you can see 4 cables. 2 positive, 2 negative. Stereo amp. At the top of the screen is where it's connected to the amp. So there are 4 cables coming out of the stereo amplifier. There it is a little bit closer. Just there. So right up in the corner, another quick connect connector. I recommend doing one speaker at a time, so the first job is to disconnect that speaker by pulling off the spade connectors. There they are, all done. This is the switching jack socket. Now normally that terminal is connected to this terminal, and that terminal is connected to this terminal. However, when you put in a jack, it breaks that connection. And now those connections are no longer connected and broken. Instead, this one is now going to the sleeve of the jack plug, and this one's going to the tip of the jack plug. You can actually see that those connections are broken. There's now a gap in between the connectors. So to get that signal out of the amp, all you have to do is insert this switching jack in between the internal speakers and the amp. And I'll explain a little further with some diagrams. Here is the amp, and here are the internal speakers. So that's what's going on inside the Katana Air, or whichever amp you're using. Here's the first of those 4 cables connecting the amp to the speakers. So we've got negative and positive on speaker 1, and negative and positive on speaker 2. That's what's going on inside. Now, here comes the mod. Put the first switching jack in between the one side of the amp and one of the speakers, and the second switching jack in between the other side of the amp and the other internal speaker. That's it. So to divert the sound from the amp to the external cabs, all you do is plug a speaker cable in between the switching jack and the cab. It will cut the sound to the internal speakers, and when you plug into the one cab, it will send the signal to that cab, and from the other switching jack, it will send the signal to that cab. And to go back to the internal speakers, just unplug the jack cables from the amp, and the original connection is restored. Here's where the mod becomes kind of permanent, because to get these switching jacks in, we have to drill some holes in the chassis of the amp. There's that acoustic fluffy stuff. Moving it down reveals some lovely little panels that we can drill holes in and insert our switching jacks. This hole is the center point of the amp, so I use that as my reference for when choosing where to drill the holes. Here I measured up from the base of the amp 4 centimeters. And there's our center point measured 4 centimeters up from the base of the amp. I then measured across that line 3.5 centimeters to the left and 3.5 centimeters to the right, and that's where we're going to be drilling our holes. So when we drill the holes, the first thing to do is to drill a pilot hole with a very, very small drill bit. That's one. There's the second pilot hole going in there. I then used a step-up drill to make those holes larger to fit in the sockets. There's the one. Notice I'm holding my hand underneath inside the amp. Don't drill into your hand, but don't let any of the bits go inside the amp. That'll be a nightmare for you. A little bit bigger, and a little bit bigger on the other one as well. I'm not sure what size they are, but I measured several times just to make sure it wouldn't go too big. There we've got a washer that goes in between the socket, the nut, and there it is ready. If you do use the Neutrik socket that I recommended, and there's a link in the video description, then this is how you put it together. There's the nut, the washer, and the socket itself. It's a plastic thread, so don't over tighten it. But all you do is put the washer and the nut on one side of the amp and the socket in the other, and then I've tightened it up with a rocket socket. This is what it looks like, and it looks pretty tidy. It doesn't really look like an aftermarket mod. Here they are from the inside. Please note that the legs are pointing down towards the circuit board. That orientation is important because this is how you measure the length of the cables, because now it's time to cut the speaker cables. To make it easier to work with, I removed the cable tie that was tying the 4 cables together, and there are our speaker cables for the one speaker we took off earlier. Now just cut those spade connectors off and make sure you have enough length to get to your socket. So there they are, the spade connectors are cut off. Those are the cables from that speaker, and now it's time to tin them with a bit of solder. They're now prepared to be soldered to the socket you installed. So here's how to solder that socket into the circuit. Come out of the amp out, the one side with the red cable, the positive, and go to that far terminal on the socket. Then take the black cable to the nearer side, that'll be your negative. If you're using the part that I recommend, then make sure you're soldering onto the side with the sticky up bent legs. That's the correct side. The other side will not work. Now that the socket is connected to the amp, we need to reconnect the speaker. So take a wire from the red side, the positive side of the socket, and run that to the positive side of the speaker. Then take a second wire and run that from the negative side of the socket to the negative side of the speaker. Because of the way the switching socket works, as far as the amp is concerned, it is still connected to the speaker and nothing has changed. It's almost like no mod exists. So I used brown wire for the red because I didn't have any red. That's soldered on to that opposite leg, as you can see just there. I also substituted a blue wire in place of the black wire because I didn't have any black. So solder that onto that leg, and now the socket is finished. All that's left to do is to solder the blue and brown wires onto the internal speaker. Screw the socket back into the chassis of the amp, and if all is well, this should be the last time you have to touch the socket itself. Then, to remember which cable goes where, refer to the picture that you took at the beginning before you removed the spade terminals. Mine are obviously not red and black, mine are blue and brown, but we have to remember that. Then solder those cables to the speaker, and then this side is done diddly done. Then repeat the same process for the other speaker on the other side of the amp, and your mod is finished. All that's left to do is to put the white fluffy stuff back inside, then put the bottom of the amp back on with the 8 screws, and you're ready to plug into an extension cab and rock just that little bit louder. There's the amp, it's finished, sockets are on the back, and before we go any further, before I plug it into that cab, a little tip, I found these little grommets. They look like earplugs, but what they do is they fit in the sockets when they're not being used. So if you protect your sockets when the amp is on, you don't run the risk of getting dirt or exposing the connection in any way. The cab is a Harley Benton 212V. It's loaded with Celestion Vintage 30s. It's a mono cab, even though there are 2 sockets. So I'm going to run the Katana Air into this cab, but also to another 8 ohm cab, the orange, just behind me, so that we're matching impedance. The perfect combination would be 2 external 4 ohm cabs, but my cabs are 8 ohms. It is perfectly fine to run this into 2 8 ohm cabs or 2 16 ohm cabs. I wouldn't run 1 speaker in here and 1 external unless the external was 4 ohms. I'm very excited because I haven't heard it yet either. So I tested it with the cab. I know it works, but I haven't plugged it into the 12-inch cab yet. So input, I'll spin that round so you guys can see it. There we go. Is that on the camera? It is. So I'm miking it up here with the E906. Then going in, let's turn the amp off first. Oh yeah, turn the amp off before you plug anything in. That's important. So I'm going to take that transmitter out for a moment. It's definitely off. I've left it for a few seconds. Plugging it into the amp, putting the amp, tiny amp, on top of the cab. Wobbly. There we go. Then I'm going to run a second cable out the back of the Katana Air into my orange cab down here. Very excited. This is either going to blow up or it's going to go extremely well. Transmitter, guitar, orange light. I'm going to plug it into the mains power actually, so we've got full Katana power of 30 watts rather than 20 when it's on batteries. I've got a mic on this cab, I've got a mic on the orange cab down there. We're going to hear it for the first time. I'm super excited. Okay, amp is turned on, everything's plugged in. I've got this cab plugged in and the orange cab just down there. I'll turn the guitar on and we're going to hear it for the first time. It works. Well, of course it works. Of course it works. But I don't know what the preset was. Let's do something. The master was on like 2. All right. This is going to be louder. That is insanely loud. Have I overloaded the preamp? Yes, I have. Hang on a second. That is too loud to talk over. So I spoke then, I don't normally speak at the same time as the guitar's going, but just to prove to you, this is how loud that is. So I'm going to talk normal volume. I'm sat in the middle. I mean, I can hear that one a lot louder, but that's insane. That little tiny amp that you may have heard before if you own one, and it sounds okay, you know, but it's the tiny little speakers. That is powering 2 2x12 cabs or 4 12-inch speakers at 8 ohms, remember. So that's actually not as loud as it can go. And I've got the master volume of the amp on 3/4. That's insane. Okay, that has just turned the Katana practice amp into a full-on amp. I'm going to put this with some drums for you in a further video. Remember, even though I've shown you how to do the mod, please don't do it. Don't break your amp. Don't come to me in the comments section and say, Andy, my amp is broken. But if you do the amp, that is, then I wish you well, and I want to hear from you if you do the mod. Do. Okay. This is the end of the video. Congratulations, you've made it to the end of the video club. To prove that you are a member of this prestigious elite, when leaving a comment in the comment section down below, please include the phrase, warranty void. And that'll let me know that you did see this part, and it gives me a little chuckle as well. Thanks for doing that. Before I leave you, I just have to say that this is not sponsored or paid for by anybody, but Boss did send me the Katana Air quite a few years ago, so I guess it kind of is, but it is 100% not endorsed by Boss. So Boss, I'm very sorry. To you guys, please subscribe to the channel because I'll be back with that and a drum kit at some point just to show you how absolutely loud it really is. Alright, enjoy yourself. I will see you soon. Bye-bye.